welcome to Media. This is your host Umar Tariq. So, some of you have asked me if I can answer how do we naturalize once we become a green card holder. So, I will try to talk about this and I'll try to answer all these questions. First, start with eligibility. Eligibility, you need to be at least 18 years of age to apply for naturalization. Second, you need to have a green card for a certain amount of time period before you could apply. Third, you need to have at least a certain amount of time period of continuous residence and physical presence in America. So we will talk about what is the difference between continuous residence, what's the difference between physical presence. You need to be able to write, read, write, and speak in English, unless you have a medical limitation. You have Alzheimer's or you have some kind of dementia, in which case you go to a doctor, get your forms filled, and they fill that form, excluding you from learning English. You have good moral character. You're not a criminal. You demonstrate an understanding of U.S. history and government, which is you study a little small book and you take an exam. They ask you about 10 questions to make sure that you do understand a little bit about U.S. history. You are loyal to U.S. and its constitution. They will ask you, would you be willing to bear arms for U.S. if the need ever arises? And you're willing to take the oath of allegiance, which you will take at the time of your naturalization. So that's very brief eligibility. That doesn't give you any information about the specifics. So let's dig into the specifics. First, let's talk about what's the difference between continuous residence and physical presence. So, physical presence is the time period that you're physically present in America. Okay, that means if you are spending a day or two outside America, or even months, that cannot be counted towards your physical presence. Physical presence is the time, the absolute time that you spend in the country. Now, what is continuous residence? Continuous residence means that you were in America, but you went out of the country. Let's say you went for a trip for 2 months trips to Mexico, then you spent 4 months in Pakistan, then you were in 1 month in India. So that is continuous residence. All this time can still be used in your continuous residence if it follows the rules. So for continuous residence, you can use the time period that you were out of country, as long as you got your green card. So now how do we break continuous residence? Let's say you get a green card, you were in America, and you go for a trip to Mexico for 5 months and then come back. Your continuous residence is not broken. But let's say if you go to a trip to Mexico for 1.5 years, your continuous residence is broken. The clock is set to zero again, and then your 5 year time period for continuous residence has to start from zero. So these are the breaks of continuous residence. So there are three different rules. So if it's less than 6 months, your continuous residence is not broken. If it's more than 12 months, your continuous residence is broken. So what about the breaks between 6 to 12 months? For breaks between 6 to 12 months, basically what it means is it's up to the person who is interviewing you, the immigration officer, to determine if your continuous residence is broken or not. So how do they determine that? They determine if you still had the intent to immigrate, or you lost your intent to immigrate during those 6 to 12 minutes, 6 to 12 months that you were out of country. And how do they check if your intent was broken? If you still had a bank account in US during that time period, if you still had a place that you were renting, or at least owned, or at least if there was any place in US where you had your physical luggage, and that basically means that you maintained your abode. Basically you had a physical presence in US between those 6 to 12 months that you were out of country. So these are the breaks in the continuous residence. So again, very briefly, less than 6 months, no issue. More than 12 months, it's gone. The clock will reset to zero. And between 6 to 12 months, then you have to show your bank accounts of those 6 to 12 months. You need to show that you had a car that was parked in a physical place in America. You need to demonstrate that you had your luggage and your belongings at a place in US, and you can just show a letter from someone saying that this person was physically present, or at least his luggage was physically present at my location, something like that. That shows you that you legally maintained your abode. So moving on, now what are the typical continuous residence and physical presence requirements? For most of the people, 95% of the people who apply for naturalization, it is 5 years of continuous residence. Basically, what that means is you have had green card for 5 years, and you were not out of the country for more than 12 months in those 5 years. You could be out for less than 6 months and 6 to 12 months, as long as you can prove your uh, intent to immigration was not broken. So, and then what is the requirement for physical presence? The physical presence is typically half of the time of continuous residence. So 5 years, 5 multiplied by 12 is 60. So 60 months divided by half is 30 months, right? So basically, the law states that you need to be physically present in US 30 out of those 60 months. So let's say if you got a green card 5 years ago, you need to be in US for 30 months out of those 5 years to apply for green card. And as far as application goes, you can apply 90 days before you're completely eligible. So let's say once your 5 year and those 30 months are completed, you can apply 3 months before or 90 days before those days are completed. So that's for the naturalization. Now there's a shorter path for spouse of U.S. citizen. So for the requirements of continuous residence and physical presence are almost cut in half for spouse of a U.S. citizen. So let's say if your wife or husband is a U.S. citizen and you got your green card because of marriage, now you don't have to wait for 5 years and the 30 months physical presence. It's basically 3 years for continuous residence and 18 months. So 36 months of continuous residence and 18 months of physical presence is what's needed for the spouse of a U.S. citizen. So I'll repeat: 3 years or 36 months of continuous residence and 18 months of physical presence. Now, since we're talking about the marriage to a U.S. citizen, I will very quickly touch upon the 30-60-90 rule. Basically, what is this 30-60-90 rule? 30-60-90 rule is that, let's say you come to U.S. on a non-immigrant visa or a dual intent visa, and you marry a U.S. citizen. So if you marry within 30 days of coming to U.S., that's very suspicious, and that's considered visa fraud. If it's between 30 to 60 or 60 to 90 days, then it's somewhat suspicious. You have to prove that you didn't commit a fraud. You did come with the legal intent of not settling in US, but you fell in love with this person. Um, so it's still in the gray area, suspicious category. If it's more than 90 days, if it's been more than 3 months that you came to US on a non-immigrant or dual intent visa, so non-immigrant is something like an F1 or B1, B2, or dual intent is like an H1. You came on those visas and you fell in love with a U.S. citizen and you married that U.S. citizen after 90 days of coming to the U.S., then you're okay. Then that's not a visa fraud. It's not a hard and set rule, but that is one of the rules that the immigration officers use to determine if you did commit a fraud. And when you applied for the non-immigrant visa, uh, were you aware of this setting that you want to come and marry a U.S. citizen? In case you ever want to do that, there is another visa for that. It's a Fiance Visa. I think you should apply for that rather than applying for a non-immigrant visa. Apply for a Fiance Visa, come, get married, and then apply for naturalization. So very briefly, the 30-60-90 rule. Now, at the end, I will talk about the 4-year, 1 day rule. So going back, remember when we discussed these breaks in continuous residence. If you're in America, if you leave America for less than 6 months, you're okay. Between 6 to 12 months, you have to prove to the immigration officer that your intent to immigrate didn't go away. You always wanted to be a U.S. citizen, even because that there was a 6 to 12 month break. But what if you take a break of 12 months? Like I said, the clock is reset, right? uh, if you take a break of more than 12 months and now you're applying for naturalization, in that case, there is another rule that applies to you, which is a 4 year 1 day rule. And that rule also applies to somebody who has been a green card holder for multiple years and applied a re entry permit. If you don't know about re entry permit, don't worry about it. It's only for people who did apply for re entry permit in the past. If you don't know about it, that's fine. Basically, re entry permit gives you the permission from US government to be outside the country for more than a year, 2 years, or even 3 years. I have personally been out of country for 3 years and did not lose my green card. So that's a re entry permit that gives you the permission. So if you were out of country for more than a year and you took re entry permit, because if you are out of country for more than a year, you lose your green card if you don't apply the re entry permit. So I will say again, if you were out of country for more than a year, you break your continuous residence, you applied for a re-entry permit, then there is something called as 4 year 1 day rule. According to this 4 year 1 day rule, the requirement of continuous residence and physical presence are now completely changed. Rather than being 5 year and 30 months for physical presence, according to this rule, it's 4 years of continuous residence and 24 months of physical presence rather than 30. So I'll repeat. So 4 years or 48 months of continuous residence during which you can travel out of the country. Uh, and then out of those 4 years, you need to be physically present in US for 24 months. Also, one more specific thing about the 4 year 1 day rule is that you can't apply 90 days or 3 months in advance. You have to apply at 1 day, like after completion of 4 years and 1 day. I don't get it. It's kind of weird that for the national path you can apply 3 months in advance, 90 days in advance, but for 4 year 1 day you can't. So I honestly hope this video helped you. I have gone through this naturalization process myself and I've helped a lot of people. So, what I would suggest is make sure you're well prepared. If it is entirely possible, and I would not be surprised, my immigration officer, visa officer, was not aware of a lot of these rules. And I did take printouts of the USCIS laws that uh, talked about all these rules. So make sure that you take a printout of USCIS website. Don't take a printout of a website or a blog. Take a printout of the proper laws from the USCIS websites, and you can simply Google them to find them with you, so that if your officer who's interviewing you is not aware of any of these laws, you can physically give them that. Also, when you're going for your naturalization interview, go very well prepared. Have uh, paper documents backing up every single statement that you make. And these include, like, I was in medical school when I was on these breaks between 6 to 12 months. And I had, but throughout that time, I was sending emails to people in America that I want to come here to do a research job, electives, you know. So that really helped me because I took printout of all those emails, and when I showed it to the immigration officer, that my intent was not broken, because throughout this time I was seeking a job in US. Also, I was studying for USMLEs during this time period, which is a licensing exams for doctors to practice in US, and there is no other reason for me to take this exam if I'm not planning on coming to US. So see, that's how I was able to get away with the, you know, at least two breaks of more than 6 months. But during that time, I had some of my luggage at a relative's place. I got a letter from my relative saying that I maintained my abode, and I did have a physical presence of my luggage in US at her place. And one more thing, that I had a bank statement. I had a bank that I did not close. So all these things I was able to prove. But I did take the letter from my relative, bank statement, and those emails. That's how I was able to get away with that. And like I said, my visa officer was not aware of 4 year 1 day rule, so I took a printout of the USCIS law. He googled, he verified, and he eventually I got a I got naturalized within 2 years of coming here, because my previous time period when I used to come, I was able to get all of that counted towards my continuous residence. Anyhow, I hope this video helped you. If it did, please like it, share it with others, subscribe to the channel, ring on the notification bell, and like I always say, never give up and never lose hope. Bye.